Hey, what's going on, everybody? I hope you guys are enjoying this podcast. On this next episode, it's going to be a two-part series. I will have the first half this week. Next week, I will have the second half for you guys. But hey, enjoy. Peace. What's going on, everybody? This is Jeremy with No Holds. I got my boy Nick Garcia here. What's up, brother?
How are you?
Doing good, man. How are you doing?
Oh, man, can't complain.
No, sir. Me neither, man. I'm blessed, bro. How was work today?
Every day's a joy, let's say that.
That's good. Heck yeah.
Every day is a thrill ride, let's say. More so than a joy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We just take it as it comes and ride the highs, and we take the lows as they, may be, and we'll see if 6 o'clock comes early enough.
Oh, man. No, I understand that. I have been there. I do know that. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Just, they can be quick answers. Favorite color?
Red.
Red.
Yeah.
Favorite food?
No. Man, I'm not picky whatsoever. I'll eat it all, even if I'm told that it's gross. I'm the type that actually may lead me to eating that just because I hear the poor reviews and I want to indulge myself, and then it may be terrible, and then I'll keep eating it just to tell you that it's terrible. But man, I diet so much these days that when I get that chance to indulge in something, that's my favorite food at that time.
So, all right, there you go.
Yeah, man. It's very, very seldom that I get to enjoy a good meal. So
Gotcha.
outside of the staples of my routines.
Yeah. No.
But man, I guess anything my mom may cook when I go and visit. There we go. That's my favorite food.
Oh yeah, that's a good answer. Very good answer. Very good answer. Yeah. One word that best describes you.
I'm not sure if one word. Let's say willpower.
Willpower?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of words that people might have for me, or other words, if we're not talking serious, maybe nostalgic. I'm a very nostalgic person. So.
Gotcha.
There we go.
All right. Would you rather be loved or feared, and why?
Absolutely loved. I'm not about the fear life. I've never really had a desire or ambition to be either or, but if the cards are going to fall in a certain way, then obviously I'd want to be loved. There's mutual respect between one another, whether I know you or not, and I don't want to come off as striking fear into someone and them feeling a certain type of way about me. So yeah, absolutely, it would be loved.
Oh yeah. The best advice you've ever gotten?
Best advice.
Can be a little
Nick,
tough.
you better straighten up. And that probably came across the board from, who knows, from my mother to the Texas legal system, everyone in between.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure at some point somebody's looked at me like, man, this guy's got to straighten
up. Okay, so then the worst advice you've ever gotten?
It's not that bad. Try it.
Oh, yeah.
I guess on the topic of what we're going to discuss here.
Yeah.
And that might have not been necessarily advice, but maybe just some insight, if you will, to something.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, no, yeah. I think
so
that's
maybe a peer pressure, if you will, something along those lines. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, if you could go back and talk to your teenage self, what advice would you give him?
Oh man, what wouldn't I tell myself now? Would I change what I've gone through in life? Absolutely not. It made me who I am. Mm-hmm. There's everything that I've ever endured has groomed and molded me exactly, to the person that I am at my age these days. But it took me 27 years to figure that out. So, if at 17, if I could have told myself to, have some ambition, some drive, to, focus on whatever it is that I might be doing, take pride in, the craft or work or whatever it is that I may have been into at that given time.
Yeah.
I was young and dumb, so where my mind was then is nowhere near where I'm at now, and that comes with maturity. But absolutely, like I said, I wouldn't change anything per se, but maybe whisper in my ear, that might not be the best idea right now. That type of thing. So
yeah. Well, talking about who you are, that's what we're pretty much going to talk about today. Is who is Nick? I know I've got to know you a little bit. When my wife found out that you were going to join the podcast, she was super pumped, man. Super excited because of your story, your testimony, to see where you are now, and like, man, I'm excited for this one too. So who is Nick? Where are you from? Were you born here?
Yeah,
raised here.
Born and raised. Lived in the same trailer house, northwest side of town, for 18 years. My parents lived there 5 years before I was born, and they still live there to this day. They planted their roots, and they're the type of household that they're never gonna move.
Yeah.
They're very. I hate to say content, because I know that they're not, or at least my mother's sake. But as far as that's concerned, they're a staple to the community. They've held their jobs for as long as I can recall, and so for myself, like I said, I grew up here, graduated high school in 2004, and then did my share of traveling and venturing through life from there. So I was gone for 10 years. I moved in 2004 after high school, and then came back in 2014. And essentially, it was just kind of wandering. I didn't know. I didn't have an identity. I didn't know who I was. Very selfish in my ways for that decade. Looking back, that's just solely what it was. I was just a selfish individual. So everything that I was doing in life was because I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
It was that type of thing. So yeah, born and raised, and got into college for a little while, and then that's when everything started to spiral. So
during those years that you were gone, was there like a certain place that you did move to, or were you just kind of just jumping from place to place to place?
I lived in Texas throughout all of it. When I was in college, I lived in Odessa. That was probably the worst decision I could have made. Looking at that city as a whole, and I actually had a colleague. He recently left our business, but he went to college down there, and he was actually valedictorian for his high school, and then went to college at UTPB and excelled, and obviously got his degree, and he's moved on to greener pastures. But not all of us go to Odessa and make it out the way that some individuals might, or I would say it's a select few that let life take them into a whole nother direction. And Odessa was at the time in 2004 was a very very different city. I mean, it's still a different unorthodox city to our area here. When you want to go out of town and you think of Midland and Lubbock, it's okay, we're probably going to go to Lubbock. And then we might go to Midland, but you very rarely say, hey, let's go to Odessa. Like that's not the case.
No,
and
sir.
That's the reason why. So but no, I lived there for a while, and then I ended up venturing to Midland for a few months. And then, like I said, life really kind of took a turn, and dropping out of college and whatnot. And then I did come back to Seminole for just a few months, kind of get back on my feet, brush myself off. At the time, I was still very young in order to do so. And then I lived in Lubbock for better part of 2.5 years or so. And then from there, that's when I moved out to the big city, and I lived in Dallas, the Dallas Metroplex area. Actually, I lived in Denton for majority of the years after that then. So I would say better part of 7 years, 6-7 years that I was out there. And experienced all of that,
Yeah.
And
now Dallas that would be somewhere I would like to live, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of, I know it's way different than Lubbock for sure because of how big it is, but I don't know. That is something that I've thought about, maybe. Andrea would probably kick me right now. It's like, no, we're not moving. But
no, it's got its benefits. I miss it to an extent. my lifestyle, as far as what I enjoy doing, going to events, whether it's concerts, sporting, things along those lines, like it's all at your fingertips, and especially where you live, or where I lived in Denton, depending on traffic and whichever way you were going on the interstate, to whether it's Fort Worth and or to Dallas, you could get there in a relatively quick time frame, but all the construction or rush hours, whatnot, that hinders that. But nevertheless, you can get and do something, relatively quick.
Yeah.
Versus here, it's you got to plan it out. Hey, we're gonna go here, take off from work or what have you. And but I love the city life. I liked everything that it had to offer outside of, the darker side of it all. If I could go back and do it over again, I would do it right, obviously. But I enjoy Seminole. There's reasons why I came back, and reasons why I kind of planted myself here, took on the job offers and career opportunities that I did. And then it helped with my sobriety as well, and being able to come back. At the time, Seminole wasn't selling alcohol whenever I first moved back in 2014.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. I was like, it's not even available. And then like 3 months later, by the end of the year, all of that had changed, and it had passed votes, and the new year came, and man, it's at Allsup's now.
Yeah.
So looking back, like I enjoyed the city life. I think of it every time I go back. I might even go out of my way to drive by my old townhouse and be like, man, all the good times I had there. And I think about, let's not venture down that road too far now. Let's just keep on. Like the nostalgic factor comes back. So.
Gotcha. Man, did you grow up in church at all, or no?
Did not.
Did not.
Absolutely not. I was as far away as one could be, if you will. If I went to church, I went to a baptism that wasn't mine. I do remember that. I think I was like 12 or 13, something like that, late 90s, somewhere around there. And then, and I know it has nothing to do with church, but I remember a relative having a quinceañera, and there's something that goes on in a church, maybe for like a few minutes, possibly. But it's nothing like too. Yeah. You're not enthralled with it all. So outside of that, if I've gone, I was, yay high, and I don't remember much of it, type of thing. So my parents, I know my mom grew up in a church. She was always, she always had ambitions and wanted us to get into church, and every so often it might have been posed to me, and but we never pursued it. There were times also that I had friends, whether I think it was more in junior high, where they would go to South Baptist here in town, and they always seemed like to have like the cool youth group or whatever, like, so all the some of the kids that I hung out with, that they'd all have like the same matching T-shirts, so you knew who was all in that youth group. Man, I want to be like them, and I think every now and again I might have got invited somewhere to some type of gathering, what have you. My very first concert was an Audio Adrenaline concert, and so that was like my first like real exposure to it, and I think that was in 97, 98, somewhere around then. So I was preteen, and wasn't even a fan of their music, but I got invited by this church group, and obviously there's worship and different things that are going on. It's not just rock music, or however you want to label Audio Adrenaline as being. I don't even remember who else was on that bill, but I remember a few times being touched, in a sense, because it was completely out of my realm. I was, at that point it was foreign to me, feeling the way that I was, but it was probably maybe around then that I might have gone home and be like, Mom, we got to start going to church. And I think she said, where do you want to go? And I threw out some random church. I don't remember what I said. She was like, no. So she's like, maybe if she had said this church, but I don't know where her mind was. My dad, he was, I guess, about as far as one could be as well. So I kind of, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree at that point, you know. So that was just kind of the lifestyle that I knew.
Gotcha.
So no, I never grew up in a church. Didn't do anything that was too meaningful or long lasting. You know, like I said, I had my few little spurts, but
Gotcha.
That's about the gist of it.
No, it's all good, man. Which I'm not to say I'm glad that you didn't, but you know, most of the people that I have had on here have pretty much grown up in church or somewhat of it, and to have you on here and kind of open up like that, that's what I was looking for anyway. You know, I want people like that. You said, let's see, after you, when was it? Maybe after, when you went to Odessa or when you got back home. I can't remember how it was. You said that's when it started to happen. Like, what started to happen? What, like, was it the drinking? Was it the drugs?
More so drugs. There was a certain time in high school, it was actually my junior year, where that's when I twisted off. Like, what is it? Is it in October? Yeah, it's the last week of October is Red Ribbon Week, I do believe it, for schools. Or something like that. I think it's like around Halloween where they dress up and do all that for like the entire week because it's the whole drug-free week or what have you. I was always that kid that I wouldn't say that I was a nerd or anything like that, and I definitely wasn't popular. I mean, I'm well known in Seminole, and I have been for a very long time. People know me for mainly my car, or they might know me for, you know, how I was in school. But like when it came to that particular week, like I loved those red ribbons. I like lined my backpack with them. Like I was proud, like because I had friends that were smoking cigarettes. You know, I say it's nothing, but you know, tobacco. I have my feelings towards that. But you know, most everybody was cool because they were smoking cigarettes after class or what have you. And you know, now I took pride in that I didn't indulge in such things. You know, and I took pride in that I didn't have the desires to, even being a teenager at that time. You know, back in the late '90s, where you know that was a unique time back then. I say nostalgic because I think back to those years, and the other day you had a podcast and y'all were talking about Jinkos. Like, get me a pair of Jinkos today. I will rock those mugs. Like, dude, you get me a FUBU jersey, we're all about it.
Yes, I remember FUBU. That is another one. FUBU,
so, like, that was a unique period of time. You know, like music was very extreme. There was a lot of stuff going on. You know, people like Marilyn Manson were all over the place.
Dude.
You know.
Yes.
Different things were happening, and so I had a lot of friends that were, you know, that's where they were at, and so I was like wannabe skater. I wanted to be cool, but I wanted that Tommy Hilfiger because I wanted to be like the preps, you know. Yep. Nevertheless, you know, like I said, I kind of took pride in those types of things, and then I got into high school and you know, you get your driver's license, and you know you're able you got a little more freedom. And my first car is a 1980 El Camino, and you know, so you know, and I think I'm some big, you know, hotshot guy. You know, I got a little hot rod out here, things like that. And was athletic and played football, and got to a point in my high school football career, if that's what you want to call it, where I just really wasn't happy with it. Didn't like the direction, but also then I wasn't dedicating myself. Like if I could go back and redo some of that, I definitely would, but I got to a point where I quit all athletics, and that particular day I knew where a certain group of friends where they hung out at. And I reached out to one of the guys, and we go to school together, but that doesn't mean that we like are buddy hanging out in the locker area or, you know, sitting next to each other in class type of thing. Yeah. But I reached out to them, and I knew what they were doing, you know, and so I was like, hey man, what are y'all doing? And he's like, oh, we're over here hanging out. And, you know, he's like, well, you're not at football practice? I quit today. You know, no, done. And back then, this is like, you had the brick cell phone, you know, like I had a track phone, like that's what I'm calling him on, like I'm cool in my El Camino, you know.
Dang it. Yeah. And
he's like, well, we're over here at, you know, such and such street. You want to come over? Yep, I'm on my way. And then that's where it all happened. That was the day that I sat in the back seat of a Taurus, I think it was, and watched a guy roll up a joint, and you know, and then that's where everything just, you know, took a far turn. You know, I then at that point I was off the path. Then at that point, that's all I did for the remaining years of high school. I was kind of known as, you know, the pothead or what have you. Like I said, I associated with everybody, you know, but I had these group of friends. I knew these group of guys. I kind of mingled with these people. You know, it was cool with everybody. I never had any enemies or anything like that. But, you know, if you wanted to smoke weed, you know, I'd be a prime guy to find, you know, type of thing. But going into college, that's moving to Odessa, as far as the extremities of what that city has to offer. And like I said, it kind of has that stigma when you think of West Texas and the different places you want to venture to for a Saturday getaway. You know, Odessa is definitely not your first choice. And so with that said, you know, there's a lot to find. And if you have that in you of something that, you know, is relatively taboo to some, or it's something that you've never embarked on, but you're not against it either, it's going to find you and it'll consume you. And so going into college, it was one of those things where it was like, well, you know, I just smoke weed every day. That's all I do. And then you get into that party atmosphere and that lifestyle, and you're young and, you know, a bunch of college kids, and hey, man, we've got all this. Well, hey, what's that all about? And so that's where everything, you know, definitely took a like I said, an even worse turn, a more major turn. At that
when you
point.
back in high school, when you started, did your parents ever find out that you were doing that?
Yeah, I'm sure they knew. There were several instances that I still think back and some of the stuff that she found and some of my excuses on what they were idiotic. Like, it's like, oh wow, man, I got away. Phew. And then I think back and I'm like, no, she knew. Like,
what was one of your excuses?
Well, she found. So one of the, I remember the first things that she ever found, and it really wasn't like rolling papers or a pipe or anything, but when you own a pipe and it clogs up, you have to clean it. And she found the glove that I had used. I had like this like latex glove, and I had it balled up, and it was under my bed. I'm pretty sure that thing reeked. I'm sure it stunk.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, what is this glove? And I was like, oh, I was cleaning my car and this and that. Like, I came up with the worst excuse for that, you know. And I remember that being the first time. And then after that, towards the latter part of my high school years, there was a wedge drawn between us that basically centered around my selfishness. I wanted to be out. I wanted to go hang out with, you know, the buddies down the street, and okay, your car's got to be on curfew, and for me there wasn't a curfew. It's like, okay, well, I'll bring my car home at 11 and I'm staying out till 1 a.m. you know, and then I'd come home and all my dirty laundry goes in there, and you know what that smells like. So yeah, it was, I'm sure they knew. And they, like I said, there was this relationship wedge that came in at that point in time where, you know, I wasn't talking to them, they weren't talking to me, our hours offset so much, you know, and I was just going to school to, you know, get through it. And at the same time, I was excelling. I mean, I was taking college concurrent classes, you know, and, you know, was looking at getting into college. That's what my goal and ambition was. And now what I was going to do with it, I had no idea. But at the same time, there was this other side of me that I was trying to keep hidden, you know, that was what I wanted, even though all of this was obviously much more, you know, important and precedent to it all. So, so yeah, there was definitely times where I'm sure they knew, you know. I'm sure my dad got in my car to move it, and golly.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, you're young and dumb, and you think that no one's, you know, paying attention, or, you know, oh, mom doesn't know, or, you know, she's not hip and cool, you know, she doesn't know.
Dude.
Yeah, they know.
Oh man,
they've been there.
Yes, and I can tell you for sure. I don't know how, but my mom knew everything. I'm talking about. I'd get home and pretty much like the next day, oh, so and so happened. I'm like, what the heck? Like, how do you know? And she would always tell me. She said, I know. I got eyes everywhere. Yeah. And they do. Yeah. Like, well, they have eyes everywhere.
For me, for my mother, whenever I was in school, once I got to elementary, she started working for the school district. Yeah, so she followed me. It went from elementary, I I got to junior high. Hey, mom's at junior high now. Got to high school. Mom's at high school now, you know. And it was it was like a two-way battle. It was one of those ones where she always had a watchful eye, but I manipulated it to be a sense of it was an excuse for me. So, Nick, why were you late? Oh, I was talking to my mom. Everybody knew my mom. So I was like, oh, I was talking to my mom. Something important going on, you know, and it always worked to my benefit to be able to get out of trouble, if you will.
There you go.
Or be in an office aide and be like, Nick sure is gone forever. Oh, he's talking to his mom. So, that watchful eye was always there, though. And so that was really tough to try to maintain this lifestyle that I was already brewing at that time, you know, because I was cool, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, but I was sustaining this life where I always tried to hide it, and I always figured, you know, I could. It was, you know, one of those things where until it bites you, you know, you do your best to cover it up, you know. And it didn't take long for it to start biting me, and then to realize, okay, there's a problem. So
yeah, when you first started Odessa, you were talking about parties. Was weed the only drug that you did, or was there other drugs?
Oh man, it got real bad real fast. Back then, things are, you know, drug culture changes and times change, and you know, so what kids and adults are doing now is a stark difference to what it was back then. You know, things evolve and they get more pure, or they change. You know, and that's even a sense for marijuana these days.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's all, you know. There's certain states that have it legal at the highest strains, and in some cases you can get it with a little pen now. And, you know, you can walk around incognito and, you know, and you're lit, or however they say these days. But something back then that really drew me and took a hold of me was ecstasy. Ecstasy was a huge drug for me in college, where it got to a point where we would call it rolling, where we would roll 2-3 times a week. And we would do it consistently, week in, week out. And I remember at one point in time, we surpassed a year. I think it was either 54 or 56 weeks consecutively that we had rolled 3 times a week, 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh, wow.
Where you're just partying all night, all day and night, you know, and then wake up, or when you finally do go to sleep, and wake up raw, and then it's like, okay, I gotta go to class today. And you go to class, and you see a guy there, or a group of guys, or, you know, a group of whoever, and they look just as terrible as you do, and you kind of look over at them, hey, you know, got some outside. You know, you ditch class, and next thing you know, you're smoking weed together. So that was our thing, you know, that we did a lot of ecstasy. And I remember at one point in time, I ended up getting a possession charge, and it was shortly after that binge that we all had that group of friends that we had in college, where that was one of the topics in this drug offenders class that I had, and they, you know, were talking about the effects of MDMA and how, you know, how it can basically eat holes in your brain. And there was a time for years, once I finally had dropped out of college and had moved on in my life, and was always trying to brush myself off. I always seemed to have excuses in life, but there was a point in time where I had a really bad lisp that I couldn't get over, that I would be mid-sentence and my brain would just cease, and I couldn't get words out, or, you know, it was real hard for me to function. And watching that video, and it's talking about all of these, like, you know, the consistent use of this and how it just eats away at your brain, I'm just sitting there like, yeah, that's me right now. You know.
Wow.
So drugs in college, they boomed at that point. It was, you know, ecstasy almost all the time, you know, eating mushrooms, different things, cocaine, you know, whatever was available was one of those things. I never got into drinking at that time.
Oh no drinking.
I never drank. I was all about just the party life. Whatever socially, groups of, you know, whether it was within our apartment complex or people that we knew from the dorms or people from class. I mean, it just seemed like everybody in Odessa at that time was doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you ever pressured? I know I was going to ask you when you were in high school, but like, were you ever pressured into doing any of that?
Mm-mm.
It was just something you, just like, let's do it.
Just the free will of it. I had that, I guess, you felt invincible, just that nothing could touch you, you
Mm.
know, and I knew better. I mean, it didn't take very long for me to get in trouble with the law and realize, okay, there's going to be somebody there with consequences at some point in time if I don't watch myself.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever really was pressured, to be perfectly honest. I don't remember anybody ever saying anything along those lines. I know peer pressure exists.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've never pressured anybody into doing something that they didn't want to do. Like I said, even for me, just for smoking my first joint was essentially just out of my own free will and saying,
No.
That day after practice and said that I was done and hung up the pads, hey, what are y'all doing? I'm coming over. So for me, it was always something that I always wanted to indulge in and just find, well, I'm not going to know until I try it. Here, oh man, I should have done that. So.
Was there ever now I'm over here stuttering. Was there ever any time when you were in Odessa to where it freaked you out, or maybe you had just enough?
Once it got to a point where those that are around you, I always had a good circle around me, if you will. When I first moved to Odessa, I had a roommate that he and I had actually graduated high school together, and it was he and his brother, and they always had friends over and whatnot, and they always had a good head on their shoulders, But versus me, I was kind of I was the bad roommate, if you will. I will never claim to have been the best roommate or the best friend, especially in those times. Again, that selfishness, it's just like, well, I'm in college, I'm paying rent too, let me have a party or two type of thing. And it was a completely different party. So, as far as, Odessa and a lot of the things that were going on, I always seemed to feel like I was invincible, that it was just one of those things that, no matter what, I wouldn't get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That, these guys here, I'll come back and then I'll have a place to stay. But, no, it was one of those things where it catches up, and it catches up really fast. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, and what about, okay, you said at that time you weren't drinking. When did you start drinking?
I didn't start drinking really till I was 21.
Okay.
I'd moved away. Finding myself at that time, that was enough for me, was living in certain atmospheres. Once I had gotten out of that particular house that I was living in and was kind of couch surfing, if you will, sleeping on buddies' couches, things along those lines. It got to a point where I remember one night waking up and a buddy of mine, his girlfriend, fiance, I don't even remember what she was, but they were on some particular drugs, and they had this big old knockdown, drag out fight, and so it led to me vacating and then essentially finding myself back in Seminole before too long. But once I moved to Lubbock, I had just turned 21. So all of this had happened before I was even 21. Like, I was living it up in my late teens.
Wow.
Just a complete idiot. And I say living it up, but I was an idiot. But I moved to Lubbock, and my first apartment, whenever I moved up there, a friend of mine had helped me move in, and I went and I got my first six-pack. And I was like, man, in my first apartment, first apartment for me, no roommates, nobody else, and, cracked open, we had a six-pack of Shiner Bock, and that was my first taste of, obviously, living on my own in a city such as Lubbock, and then also having that ability of purchasing alcohol.
Yeah.
But I guess that was the thing for me, was I never wanted to reach out to friends. I'm sure we always had alcohol. I remember there always being parties or get-togethers and whatnot, and there would always be certain groups over here that might be drinking, and then we would be over here partaking in what we were doing. But as far as actually drinking and getting involved in that particular lifestyle was when I moved to Lubbock, and at that time they didn't have alcohol sales in the city either. You had to go out to the Strip.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
so
right.
we had to go all the way out to the Strip, and we thought we were cool, because we were both 21.
Yeah.
It's like this like mini Vegas Strip with all the lights and all the beer stores.
Yes, I know. And I remember when my pops would go over there, and we would go to Pinky's, and he would buy the gizzards. I remember that.
That's a nostalgic throwback.
Dude, yes. And I was like,
Gizzards,
oh my gosh. But yeah, that was back in the day.
I had a friend that he wanted to go to one store, but on our way out, when he come out on the backside, he had to stop at Pinky's.
Yeah.
It was a staple for him.
Yep. It was always Pinky's. Every time we were in Lubbock, we got to stop over here real quick. I already know where we're going. It was Pinky's.
No, alcohol, that's when then I started indulging this.
Did you, were you also partaking in the drugs also while you were drinking at that time, or did you pretty much?
Once I left Lubbock, I ceased a lot of my old habits, mainly because obviously the falling out of, with a lot of friends and dropping out of college rather. I was done with that. I was wanting to move away from that, get away from, that style of living. And Lubbock is still relatively close, and I'm sure at that point in time it had all of the same things to offer. But for me, myself, I wanted to straighten up, if you will. And in my opinion, and it's one of those things where our culture and our current day of living with cannabis, as it's referred to a lot now, with it being medicinally used and being in several states fully legal and so forth. I always had views back then about weed and thinking, well, it's just pot, it's nothing major. And so I maintained that for 10 years. I was a stoner through and through. And back then, I mean, you couldn't tell me otherwise. I was adamant that I would be smoking the rest of my life, thinking, oh, this is nothing, and I used to say some wild stuff. I think back on some of the stuff I used to say in regards to marijuana, but I used to be the type that would say, man, when he's 15, 16, I'll roll up. like we'll break him in. And I think of that now, and I'm like, that is insane. And no matter where we're at with marijuana reform and all the different stuff that's going on in present day, I still feel that I'm steadfast in that and thinking that's wild. Like there's absolutely no way. Like I couldn't imagine doing that with my son. That's the last thing I would ever do.
Yeah.
I want them to be as far away from anything, exposure to that. Now I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and tell them it doesn't exist. These things are out there and they will find you, but it will be something that they won't see me ever indulging in. So,
gotcha.
And then that's that's one of those things where I lived in Lubbock for that amount of time. I maintained that habit, and every now and again I might partake in psychedelics. That was the thing for me. It was like, well, I'm not frying my brain from this, but I'll eat some mushrooms and have a good time, or things like that. But as far as a lot of the hard substances that really deteriorated a lot of my well-being, I had set aside. But alcohol is no joke either. Alcohol, that right there is just as bad as any others, if not worse. If you let it control you, take over your life. So
did you with the other drugs, did you be able to just kind of quit cold turkey, or did you kind of have to work your way out of it just real slowly?
I guess it varied. For most of them, for something like ecstasy, ecstasy, you've got several different, or back then, I don't even know how they do it anymore. I don't even know if you can buy ecstasy pills any longer, but used to, it was, you had them based, and they would, you'd have like your speed based, and you'd have mescaline based, or you would have heroin based, and then these are just the ways that they mix them, and then they compact it into this little pill and say, here you go. And so the effects that you might feel from each one and how they're based is how it's going to affect your night and how your trip was, or what have you. Something like that was quick for me to drop. Like, I didn't want any part of that, because certain ones make you feel a certain way, and you're up all night, and the next day is just rough, and so I got tired of feeling that particular way, and was like, you know what, that's what ruined me the most. That's what basically ended all of my college days or any type of pursuing education and whatnot. But other stuff was really just kind of, well, it doesn't do all that. It's not that bad. Well, hey, it's available. Okay, I'll indulge with it. But no, as far as a lot of being cold turkey, that's where I would say, when you asked about what's one word that would describe you, as willpower. I found early, when I was 22, how strong my willpower was. And so even though I still had these habits, that was purely by choice. Those were things that I wanted to do. That was my own selfishness in it, and still partaking in smoking weed for so long that I did. Other stuff was really quick for me to set it down, just because I was done with it. And I am that type. More so now that I'm completely sober. I'm the type that when I tell you I'm going to do something, we're going to do it, or I'm going to do it. My word is is everything. It's my bond. And so I found when I was 22 that when I wanted to do something, that I could do it. And so that was something that, then I took, and as the years gone on, then, it's become more steadfast. So now to answer your question, as far as, was you able to walk away from it, a lot of it was real easy. The other stuff was mainly just greed and just being selfish, I guess.
Did you have any of your friends around you to pretty much encourage you to keep going, to get past all that?
Not really. Back then, as far as like when I was living in Lubbock, as far as like my high school days and college days, I accumulated a lot of friends. I still have a lot of friends. I've got friends in both cities, Midland, Odessa. I've got friends in Hobbs. I've got friends here in Seminole, Lubbock, Amarillo, all of West Texas, if you will, southeastern New Mexico. Now, are they my friends? Like, can I lean on them and get some advice, or be able to confide in them when I needed to then and or now? Absolutely not. Are there some that will reach out to me, or might say, hey, that's awesome, what you're doing, things like that? Yeah, they might. There's a few. There's select few. But back then, we were all a part of that party lifestyle. I mean, everybody was going to somebody's house, and whether these group of guys were going to this guy's house on this side of town or on this side of town, wherever I had groups of friends at, I was going to be at one of those. And so as far as being able to encourage and get away from some of that, I had removed myself from those essentially once I got away from Midland, Odessa. As far as in Lubbock, that group of friends, we were a bunch of basically concert going rock star type of guys. They'd play a concert and then they'd leave, and then there'd be like this after party, and it's like, okay, well, you going to after party? Heck yeah, we'll be over there. So that's the type of stuff that we were doing. At that time, there wasn't a whole lot of the stuff that was going on in that party scene. This was more of, a bunch of headbanging rocker dudes that just like to get drunk and things like that. So that's where that was. So it was easy for me to not indulge in those, because it really wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that they were encouraging me to get away from it. It's just that it was a different realm of friends.
Gotcha.
Essentially.
Did you were you ever, or how do I word this? Was drinking ever part of your life maybe because you were depressed in some kind of way? Or was it more because of you like the feeling, the taste?
No, alcohol for me, once I got to Lubbock, obviously, again, the Strip. So you're really having to go out of your way to get alcohol over there. Yeah. And so I would leave work purposely during lunch and be like, I'm going to go to the Strip way over there, and then try to make it back before my lunch hour was over. And that way now I've got all my beer, and then when I leave, now I've got it. But I was because you're going so far out there and you've got these massive beer stores or alcohol stores, I called myself a connoisseur, if you will. Like, I was all about looking at all the random six packs, and I would up and down every aisle looking at them, oh man, that catches me. I haven't tried that one. And so I would be the type where I would buy 2 or 3 six packs of some craft or, seasonal beer, if you will. And then I would go and then I would buy my 30 pack of something, really cheap. Mm. And so, these are my tasting beers, and then I might drink a couple of these just to kind of fulfill or kind of put those in, to make me feel good, if you will. But it was never because at that time, feeling depressed or anything like that. I never battled depression. I never had any type of mental anxiety or anything like that. It was, if I did, it was masked. It was completely numbed over. Probably more so just because I was stoned so much. That's all I did was smoke weed. But as far as alcohol was concerned, it didn't take over me until I moved to Dallas. That's when alcohol really affected. That's when alcohol came to the forefront, and that's where everything in my life was centered around with alcohol. When I lived in Lubbock, it was one of those things where, like I said, we would get a couple of buddies of mine. They liked the fact that I liked all of these random beers and whatnot. And so we would get together and, hey, let's go out to the beer store, and then we would, indulge with all these stuff. And I thought it was cool because I had like this shrine of like, all the random beers that we ever drank and whatnot. We keep empty bottles or cut out the six pack, the labels, and then like line the wall with it. Like, that's my beer wall. Look at all the beer we ever drank. like it was ridiculous. Like, it was like a man cave, And
did you ever keep what are those things? I can't even remember what they're called now. Oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. They're not caps for the cans.
The little tabs?
The tabs, yeah. Yes. Dang it, my mind went blank.
No,
yeah.
I never did that.
No?
As far as caps, I know we did something with caps. And I know that I've had friends that they've taken an old table and then they've lined it with caps, and then I don't know what you pour over, but
oh yeah,
and you make it like glossy and clear, and you have this tabletop and whatnot. Never did anything like that, but I just thought I was the coolest because you walked into my house and I had a bunch of concert posters, and then I had like this shrine of beer and I like the random bottles, like you find like a big bottle of some seasonal beer that's like this big. And,
oh yeah,
man, what was that? And then you have like some story to tell behind it. And it's ridiculous.
Let me ask you this real quick. Was that when you moved, I guess, to? Or at what age did you first taste beer? Was it at that time, or did you ever taste it when you were in high school?
First time I ever drank alcohol. I'm sure my dad probably at one point in time handed me the can. That was the type of environment that I grew up in, so I know for sure I was probably in the, what do you call that?
Elementary?
No. One of those.
like elementary?
Like you're a little baby and you're running around, and that keeps you up.
On a walker?
Yeah, like a walker type of thing. Like, I'm sure my dad was like, here you go. And I'm sure there's pictures of me with a beard, to be perfectly honest.
You know what?
I was a Hispanic family. That's just the culture and the environment we had. Every weekend was get together at the uncle's house or whoever family member's house. So I'm sure I tasted it then. As far as like full on indulging, I would say it was probably sometime in high school where maybe like a prom weekend or something like that. I know for sure that there was a prom weekend that might have been junior year where I got a little inebriated, but on that notion of growing up in that type of environment, something that always kept me away from drinking was I didn't like a lot of what was happening at family gatherings. Like, I always said that wasn't going to be me. I didn't want to be like my father. I didn't want to be like my uncles, or I didn't want to be like family friends, and they're always belligerent and whatnot. It's one of those things where, it affects you so much that you end up becoming that because that's just all that you know. It's all so familiar. And so as far as the first time ever tasting it, and I guess, liking it was probably when I was actually 21. Outside of that, it was kind of just those sporadic moments where, like, for instance, I know of one time where I sat on the edge of a keg one night in Denver City, and then that's all I remember.
Oh, wow.
Like, I remember waking up, and my friends had drugged me into this, like, barn area, like this, it's like a backyard shed barn that they had, and they had couches and whatnot. And I woke up and I just had dirt all in my mouth, and they were like, "Yeah, you walked outside and we had to find you, and you were just in the, you know." So there's those type of those, like, you're young and you're just like, "Oh yeah, I'm having a good old time," and then you realize that there's a limit, and once you pass that, you know, hey, watch yourself. And so those mixed with the fear of not wanting to be like the things that I grew up around, you know, really kept me from really investing a lot of time into alcohol.
Yeah, I know. And that's pretty much how we were too growing up. Pretty much partied every weekend. You know, there was a party every weekend, and there was alcohol. Of course, you know, like you said, Mexican family. It's the culture. I'm not saying all of them are like that, but that's pretty much when you talk to somebody that's Mexican, that's how they grew up. There's always alcohol there. And my first time drinking alcohol was probably, let me see, I think I was in maybe junior high or maybe a little younger. It was an uncle of mine. He had gave it to my cousin, and then my cousin's like, "Here, you know, you take a sip." I took a sip. I hated beer after that. I was like, this is nasty. Then I go into high school, and we go to Colorado for it's a vacation, I guess. And there we go to this little gathering. It's like my cousin and then their cousins and some other friends, and they had Mike's Hard Lemonade. And then, here you go, you try this. And I tried it, and I was like, "Oh man, that's pretty good. What is that?" It's like, "Oh, it's just lemonade." It's like, "Oh man, heck yeah, that's good." Didn't think anything of it. Get back home, my sophomore year. It's me and my cousin and another buddy of mine, and we go to the Strip, because I'm from Florida. It's maybe 45 minutes from Lubbock. And we go to the Strip. We buy a case 24 of Mike's Hard Lemonade, not knowing at that time how much alcohol is in there. We're like, "Hey, let's just see how much we can chug before we get home." Okay. I think I chugged like 12 of them. And then it split up between my friend and my cousin, and I don't know how I got home that night. But I kind of remember walking in, going to, back then, you know, phones had caller IDs, or you had to buy the caller ID separate. Went to the phone, and I was checking the caller ID, and my mom, at that night, she wanted to rearrange the whole living room. So she was like, "I need you to come help me move the TV." It's like, "No, I'm good." And she was like, "No, I need you to come help me." I said, "No, get my brother to do it." And she has a hammer in her hand, and she was like, "Are you drunk?" I said, "Mm-mm." She looked at me, and she was like, "Are you drunk?" Yeah. Oh, man. After that, it was, yeah, I don't remember what happened after that, but I do know she said, "I wanted to hit you so bad with this hammer." I really did, but I do know how having a parent and being involved in that culture can have that effect on you. You know, because the way I am now, like, I don't want to, like, my dad passed away when I was 9, so, but even at that, watching him is like, man, I don't know if I want to be like him. Like, that's my dad, but I don't want to be like that when I grow up. Right. You know, so I do know that effect, or how that can affect you. When you moved to Dallas, you said that was like the worst.
Yeah.
How did alcohol like affect you that bad over there?
Well, once I got out of Lubbock, that was in 2008, and was really based upon the idea that I was going to finally do something for myself. I was going to make an...
Okay, yeah, I was about to ask you, like, what made you move to Dallas?
I was going to make a name for myself. I wanted to get into UNT there in Denton. It's a college, but they have a film and art and, you know, musical, you know, they have a lot of talent come out of there, if you will, because they have this film and art department and whatnot. And so I had this idea that we're gonna, my buddy at the time was just about to graduate from there, and he had a degree, and he's like, man, you could go and you could do this, and then we can be partners, and it was all pipe dreams, just different things, like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And nevertheless, I moved out there and did it right, essentially, at first, being able to get a house and different things, and at that time was moving in with my best friend. We had run the streets of Seminole for a long time back then, and that's when I was really exposed to a different side of him that I didn't know. And then it actually exposed me to a side of me that I didn't know, and so I wasn't, even though I drank and I liked partaking in different things, I was never a bar hopper. I never liked going out in Lubbock, and like, actually, when I lived in Lubbock, I had never been to the Depot District. I didn't go to the Depot District till, man, some years later. I came back and was like, this is what it's all about? Yeah, never been. But I got down there, and we were close to the university, and right behind the university is a street there called Fry Street. And it's basically like a mini 6th Street down in Austin. So all the college kids are there. It's the happening place. Everybody's out and about, and so that was his thing. That's where he liked to hang out, and all of his groups of friends and whatnot. And so that's when I find myself more drinking out in public settings than I would be, at home, type of thing. And so that's where it really took a hold of me. Was I wasn't doing it in the confines of somewhere that when I was drunk and messed up, then I could just go and pass out somewhere. It's now I'm out in public, I got to control myself. And that was one of those things where he himself, he was all night, let's get another round, let's keep going. And okay, well, get me one too, let's keep going, I'll buy the next one, type of thing. So it really took over once I got out there, just because it was a different environment. It was something that I hadn't been exposed to, essentially, even though I had done all of this partying in Midland, Odessa, and I had, now started indulging with alcohol in Lubbock and thinking that I, had this palate and taste for it, and I was a connoisseur, if you will, Then I get out there and it's like, oh, what's cheap? Okay, let's go to the bar because we're about to spend a lot of money here, so what's cheap? And then, you start watching other people and, the troubles that they're having, or even somebody like my roommate and the troubles that he's having. And then, like I said, it kind of exposed a different side of him that I didn't know. And so that really drew, again, like a wedge between he and I, to where we went our separate ways. And then at that point now, there I was in the Dallas area, just, living solo, family 6 hours away, no other friends or anybody nearby. And it was like, well, I'm here, I'm not gonna move back, so got a townhouse and landed a job that was pretty good, and then stayed there all those years. So then at that point was just watching myself, not even, there was nobody else to watch out for me. So it's like, well, I'm here, I guess I'll indulge in this, and alcohol was a key focal point.
Like, how bad was it over for you?
For me, I was always the type, like I said, man cave. Love watching college sports, college football. And so Saturdays, wake up, have my main TV on, I have a side TV on, and then I had my computer set up, and I would have like all these games streaming on there, and then I had buddies come over, and we'd sit there and just watch college football all day. And at that time, then I'm in a new area, a new part of town, and then there's new neighbors, new people and whatnot, and then, and I'm very outgoing. I'll chop it up with anybody, and then at that point, I'm attracting and getting involved with like the least desirable people, if you will. I'm not brushing shoulders with the elite of the town. I'm kind of brushing shoulders with the guys that roam the neighborhood in that area, type of thing. And that's just my nature, you know. I'm gonna, you know, hang out with, you know, any old buddy, especially back then.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where, you know, we'd kill off so much beer and alcohol, and then the night game would come, you know, and be like, well, you know, there's the primetime game on ABC that's about to come on, and then, well, Pac-12 still has some games out on the West Coast. They're going to be going all night. There's going to be a game up to like midnight, 1 a.m. still, you know. Well, let's go get more beer. we got more games to watch. It got to a point where, I mean, I didn't stop. And myself, when it comes to me and drinking, and especially being out, like if we were to leave my place and go out somewhere, I'm driving. My keys are with me. You know, you can't convince me that my keys don't go with me.
Yeah.
You know, so, and at that time, I don't remember really Uber being a thing yet. It might have been a thing maybe towards like 2010 or 11 or 12, somewhere in there, but I don't remember it being a thing back in like 08, 09 just yet.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And so you couldn't convince me otherwise. So we'd go out and we'd go to the corner, you know, bar, you know, and living in a college town like that, there's bars everywhere, you know. And so once I got a townhouse and lived there for all those years, the closest bar was literally at the intersection. You just go down to the red light and there's one right there. And then there's a corner store on the opposite side. Just go and get beer there, you know. So go drink, have a few there, walk out, go to the corner store, and then head back to the place, you know. So alcohol was a staple. It was, you know, wake up and, you know, gotta watch Nebraska football today. Well, I'm drinking.
Yeah.
And being a Nebraska fan, well, you have a lot of heartaches, and, you know, the team doesn't do all that well, so the team sucks, and you drink another one, and then you're mad by the fourth quarter, and you're just belligerent drunk. So.
No, whenever you left the house, did you ever get pulled over? Did you ever get caught or anything?
No. I had a brush one time. Actually, it was my going away get together. I think it was. I was living in Lubbock, and I knew I was past that limit. You know, I was far beyond it. And so I remember leaving that particular bar that we were at, that everybody wanted to go to. And I had never been there before, rarely was on that side of town. And I remember pulling over in an alley. I pulled off in some random street in Lubbock and parked in an alley and just sat there. And luckily, no one pulled up on me or saw me come into that alley and wondered what I was doing or anything like that. So that was kind of like my first instance of like, you know, you should watch out, you know, maybe, you know, straighten up, Nick, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
But it was in Dallas in 2011. I got my first DWI, and the idea was that a group of friends of mine were coming from Hobbs, and we were going to be hanging out, and we were going to be going to a Dallas Stars game, and so they had gotten a hotel nearby there on the freeway there in Dallas, and so I was just going to commute in from Denton and just hang out. You know, I had no intentions on leaving, but that was my first run-in with the law was that night when it came to drinking. Now, prior to then, I had already had probably several arrests when it came to drugs, but that never stopped me. I always had this idea that getting in trouble with the law was just temporary. You know, it's like, I'm just going to do whatever I have to do my year of probation or do these courses that they need me to do, and then, man, you're just a speed bump, you know, get out of my hair, and then I'm back to my old ways. As far as alcohol was concerned, though, this was my first night and having, you know, an arrest based upon that. And so we went to this game, had a good old time. I remember we were coming down the escalators there inside of the American Airlines Center, and looking out, and it was sleeting. It was the final winter storm of that season. I feel like it was in March, I may be wrong, February, March. It was kind of unordinary to have such a late winter storm such as that. It was actually the same weekend that Whitney Houston died. I remember that. So whatever month or year that was, like I said, it was 2011 that had happened, or no, 12, I believe. So we left there nevertheless and got to the hotel, and my buddies, they had a particular liquor that they like to drink, and so okay, let's hammer down, let's do it. And I remember it got to a point where the bartender at the hotel was like, "Duff killed my bottle." It's like, we don't have that bottle anymore.
Oh, wow.
What do you have? And so that's the last of it. Like I said, I wasn't supposed to have left that night, and I don't know. I still don't know the whole story. I kind of never wanted to know, if you will. But I ended up obviously getting up, took my keys with, got in my truck, and the next place I woke up was in the middle of the freeway doing 360s, and I had collided with one vehicle when I had awoke, and then I collided with the second vehicle, and then I ended up hitting the barricade there in the middle of the freeway. And like I said, it was sleeting, and so I woke up and immediately adrenaline rush. Now I'm like coherent and not drunk, if you will.
Yeah.
And I remember getting out of my truck and immediately running to the first car that was closest to me, and it was there was sleet and there was ice, and boom, I just busted myself. I fell, got up, and I ran over there. And the first car I approached, I asked the guy, I was like, "You okay? Everybody all right?" And he's like, "It's just me. I just dropped off my wife and kids." And I was like, man. He ran to the next car. "Y'all okay?" Yeah, we're all fine. And I just sat in my truck and just watched all the lights come at me, ambulance and, fire department and police, everybody, and that was my first brush with alcohol and the law, and, knowing that, okay, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Because at that point in time, like I said, it had been growing. It was a growing monster. I was becoming everything that I always said that I never would. I disliked everything that I grew up around, as far as the environments, the alcohol. Every weekend hanging out, barbecuing. Hey, it's a good time. What have you. But that's literally what I grew up around. Was barbecue and playing horseshoes or washers or something in the backyard. Parents and family, everybody drinking, and you're a part of that. Some of those things that would happen, I always disliked people getting drunk and then not knowing who I was. That would just irk me. It's like, I'll never be that. I'll never drink alcohol. I'll never get drunk like that. And then living there, that's just all I did. I'd go to work and get off of work and drink until I pass out. And then I wake up, do it all over again. And that was daily. And like I said, marijuana was always a focal. That was a point. Break time at work. Hey, let's get stoned. Get off of work. Hey, it's time to smoke. All right, crack open a beer.
Hey.
And so once I got my first arrest, man, that was you would think that should have been it for me. I like I said, it was a weekend that Whitney Houston died, so I got to hear "I Will Always Love You." Oh man, probably several dozen times in that jail, because every TV that was on in that jail, like they had it all blaring, and they were all on the news, and they just kept recapping Whitney Houston's death. They kept playing that song, and by the end of it, I was sick of that song. So I hear that song, and I'm like, yeah. Can we turn that off? But no, that particular jail that I went to, it's called Stuttering. It's the county jail there in Dallas. you're actually right in the thick of it. It's downtown Dallas, but it's about as close as a prison as one can get to, in my estimation. I've never been to prison, but man, I saw some stuff in that jail, and I was there for several days due to the fact that because it's so populated, there's so much going on there. Like it took me several days to actually get through the entire processing and be able to get released. So I actually no-showed to work several days because I was locked up. So obviously had at that point, totaled my truck, had nearly killed other people, spent several days in this jail environment that was unlike any jail that I'd been to. At this point I had several arrests for marijuana and whatnot, but seeing everything that was going on in there, it should have been eye-opening.
Yeah.
But I got out and I didn't really get a whole lot. It was really, to be honest, like a slap on the wrist. Just, move on. We're just, they always said, I remember a lot of different legal personnel always saying that we're just trying to get you through this point of life. Just get you through. Just get you through. And some people might look at that in different ways. For me, like I said, with other arrests, it was always, you're just a speed bump at this point. I've got other matters going on in life. There's a lot of weed out there, and I can't smoke it because you have me on probation. That was kind of my outlook on that. Real ridiculous, Like, I should be having fun, but I got to go to you,
Yeah.
And Buddy's like, hey, what's going on? Oh,
nothing.
I got to report in the morning. I hope I don't get busted, And I was also, at that point in time, I was still unsure of myself. Like, I didn't have an identity.
Yeah.
I was 20. Oh man, what was I? 20, 25, 26. I was just before. I think I was just about to turn 26, because that would have been right before my birthday in May, and so. At that time, I had a corporate job. I was working in a high-rise building there in Denton. I had a decent life going. Like I had a great work environment. I had the right people around me. But it was always similar to how you had asked about. My mother. Did she ever know? Like I kept all of my lifestyle, hidden. I'd go to work, business casual. Dress pants, button-up shirt, every day, hair all done and whatnot. And then the moment I walked out, let loose, and so they never knew that of me.
Yeah.
And then that ended up happening where got my first DWI, no-showed for a few days. When I got out of jail, there in the Dallas area, they have the rail system, and city bus and things like that.
Oh yeah.
So by the time I got out several days later, I got out like at 10:30 at night, and I got out of the jail, and like I said, you're in the thick of Dallas, so you've got like the Reunion Tower, the big ball, you got like all the fancy lights and hotels and all the different stuff downtown, all the fancy buildings, and there I am just getting out of jail, this scum, feeling terrible, and I don't have a vehicle. I've got to get 30 miles north. So that was my first time ever hopping on a rail, thinking, okay, I'll just get home. I got all the way to Carrollton, and that's where the rail changes from being city of Dallas to what they at the time called this A train. And they had this old school train that connected Denton to Carrollton. So I get there and I'm on the train station dock, and that train is just left the dock, and I run and I look at the scheduling, and there's a lady there. She's like, that's the last train for the night.
Ooh.
It's like, you're kidding. She's like, no sir. Looked at that sign again. Maybe I misread it. Maybe she's pulling my leg. Nope, that's it. So, oh man, I gotta get home. I gotta go to work tomorrow if I have a job.
Yeah.
And so hailed a cab, and I paid close to $200 to get me home. From the remaining part from there to Denton, you know, because I was getting him way out of his element, so he's just racking it up, and then, oh, here, you got me home. Here's a tip. You know, so obviously I was alone. Mm-hmm. You know, like I had friends, you know, but you know, were they my friends at times like that? You know, no. You know, and so obviously bailed myself out, you know, did everything I needed to do. That was something with all of my jail stints that, you know, I never relied on anybody. It was always, you know, I'd have to beg and plead and let the jailer know that I had money in my wallet. If you just swipe my card, we're good, you know, or maybe I had cash, but, you know, I never had to call my mom and be like, Mom, you know, I'm in jail, you know, like that was something where I hid it from everybody because I didn't want to disappoint them. I didn't want to disappoint my mom. I didn't want to disappoint my family. You know, I didn't want to be that black sheep of the family that, you know, did you hear about Nick again? Oh, when's he going to learn? Yeah. You know, and so I made it back to Denton that night, and, you know, there was old Reliable there, you know, in the refrigerator, you know, still on the ashtray, you know. Oh, you know, let's do it again tomorrow. What's gonna happen? It never dawned on me. You know, none of this really settled just yet. Went to work the next day, walked in, scanned my badge. It worked. Like, hey, they didn't cancel my badge. I can still get in the building. Went, sat down, and then you know, shortly thereafter had the talks with the right people, and they were just like, you know, how are you? You know, are you okay? You know, any major injuries or anything like that? And they were more concerned in my well-being. Yeah. You know, they were more concerned of you know, the accident that had occurred, more so than, well, why weren't you at work the last handful of days? Yeah. Oh. You know, they weren't concerned of, oh, we ran all the Dallas County, you know, jail reports and there was your mugshot. You know, that was the type of company that I had. That was the environment that I had. That, you know, they were more concerned of me as a human than as, you know, at that point a criminal. You know, man, that's good. You know, so that really, you know, was beneficial. You know, to have that type of work support. You know, I didn't get canned. You know, which any other job they would have, get out of here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.